Yo, what up guys? Welcome back to Sneaker Stories. As always, I'm your host Chris Jack. It's 2020, back in the room finally with the reviews again, and kicking things off with none other than my last official pickup of 2019, and that is of course the Adidas and Consortium team's take on the EVO Runner or Consortium 4D Runner V2. Without further ado, let's check them out. Alright, so the latest 4D installment from Adidas and Consortium dropped on the 21st of December 2019. It was actually the day I was leaving for holidays, so I managed to hold the trip back a little later so I could pick these up in the morning of release. And obviously took them on holiday with me, actually wore them a little bit as I couldn't really wait for the review to get these on feet. And overall speaking, just off the bat, I'm incredibly impressed with where the 4D technology is going with Adidas on this particular pair. I think it's definitely a step in the right direction for this particular technology, and I'll get into why I think that in this review, of course. But just before we get into the review itself, I just want to quickly run through what we've seen from the 4D range for the last 3 years since it released. Starting up here with the OG runners, of course, there was a hell of a lot of hype around 4D when it first came out. Everybody really wanted to get their hands on the technology and try what it was like on foot, and since then we've seen a whole host of different shoes where there have been varying levels of hype, of course, especially the other Consortium partnerships, one of which I've got here, the Invincible, and actually the Kith Mid just behind me, as well as SNS and Foot Patrol as well, where there was lots of hype around it. The resale values were really high, and since then things have kind of tapered off. And although we have seen one or two other hype releases, of course the Daniel Arshams down here, and then obviously the original Consortium take on this particular pair, which is the V1 version of this, and this was originally a friends and family pair only, and then they released it globally a couple of months after they had given it out to specific people only. So it's really nice to see a follow-up to this particular pair. There are some fundamental differences between the two, most notably the upper and the midsole on this particular pair. But with this pair that we're talking about today, there was only one thing that really just didn't sit very well with me in the beginning when I first saw the photos, and that was with the inclusion of this second generation 4D midsole. And some of you guys might recognize that from a popular 4D shoe which has been pushed out in so many different slight variations of colorway, the Alpha-Edge 4D. And now I've done a very extensive review of this particular pair. I'll link it in the description below if you guys do want to check this pair out and really understand more about the technology that goes into this particular pair in terms of making that 4D midsole. But one thing I just wanted to show you, it is the same, because besides this pair, this is really as far as the technology has come and all the minor tweaks and stuff they've made to it. So it's got a bit of a hybrid between the older models and this, obviously the Alpha-Edge as well. So to get into that and just to show you and get up close in the details on this particular pair, starting with the outsole, you'll notice this has the same outsole as the Alpha-Edge. It's quite similar to what you'd usually get on the V1 soles as well. It's completely closed off to not allow any foreign objects into the midsole of the shoe, but the rubber, which is a Continental one, is slightly thicker on this particular pair, so it's increased durability and traction as well on foot. The midsole shape, as mentioned, wasn't really my favorite of it because I do prefer the aesthetics of the original V1 runners over there. However, that might just be me. I think a lot of people out there could prefer this particular kind of midsole shape, and that could also have other benefits such as increased stability on foot for the wearer. But for me, I think it actually works a hell of a lot better with this particular upper on the shoe, which is definitely more layered and more retro inspired than we've seen in the previous sockline constructions on previous models, which Adidas has definitely stepped back from in terms of their output. And speaking about the upper, this is my favorite part of the shoe. In fact, when I put all these shoes up on the wall behind me, this is definitely the one that just stands out the most, and it's fast becoming my favorite one on foot, if I'm very honest. The layering effect that they've used here is a whole host of different materials, including these faux suede overlays here done in these squiggly patterns, a whole bunch of embroidery that you can see here in the 3 stripes, and these other small details towards the toe box, as well as highlighting of certain panels here in the rear section of the shoe. And a couple of pairs actually come to mind when I look at this particular pair, including the feet you wear. This is the Kith and Ronnie Fieg version. You'll just notice similarities between the base layer of the mesh and then material overlays in that as well. And then of course the young one with those those sort of wavy pattern overlays that you've got, multi-layering effects happening over there. And then last but not least, the shoe that I actually reviewed quite recently here from the sister company Reebok, it's the Zig Kinetica, and this really uses a whole bunch of the same materials in very similar ways on the uppers of the shoes. And one thing to note about both of these pairs, although with multi-layering and different material mixes on the uppers of the pair, the uppers still remain very, very thin on foot and incredibly breathable with the use of mesh throughout the uppers themselves. Switching up into the lacing system, this is one of the craziest lacing systems I've ever seen, at least on a 4D model that is. It's very, very zigzaggy and weird. In fact, it's so overwhelming that I just did not even want to put the second laces in because I was scared I wasn't going to be able to actually lace it the correct way that they have done here with the stock lacing itself. But speaking of those laces, they do come in an onyx purple colorway with 3M hints throughout. And if you don't like that and want to lighten things up on top, they do also provide you with a white set of laces as well, which are just thin, flat laces, which you can add there to just bring more of the lighter colors towards the top of the shoe. And just some detailing on there, you do have an Adidas Performance logo down here on that fused overlay, and then you've also got this piece of stitching that's gone underneath the lacing section, which is done in a suede here, with another Adidas Performance logo up there on top. The tongue itself is something that's quite different on this particular pair. Apart from the standard Consortium punch-through tongue tags that we've seen on all Consortium models to date, the tongue material itself is quite stiff, and it also doesn't really sit normally. So the potential for this tongue to slide to one side or the other side, depending on how you walk, is quite real, to be honest. So if that's going to irritate you, then maybe these aren't for you. But for me, I think the tongue looks pretty awesome on foot. And swinging around to the heel section of the shoe, you do have a rather neoprene padded finish over here, and that is on both sides, the external and the internal of the shoe, just providing a nice level of comfort for your heel there. These are pretty comfortable on foot. I wouldn't say that they are the most comfortable 4D that I have. I still think that you can't beat the runner variations of it that we've seen over the last sort of 2 years with those releases. It just feels a little bit more rigid on foot than what I'm used to with those particular pairs, and that's mostly just to do with the upper because it's not that sock-like primeness, which is really, really comfortable on foot. But moving inside the shoe as well, it's nice to note that they have included some different detailing on the inside of the shoe, and most notably, it's got to do with this huge window that basically extends the full foot of the footbed of the shoe, which you can see straight into that ladder system from the top, with the exception of a small piece of material that's covering a section towards the forefoot of the shoe. But it's really, really nice to be able to see that. It also increases the ventilation from air coming through the shoe and underneath your foot. And then one last detail that they do have here, they have included a 5-step process of what goes into creating this midsole. For those of you who want to know more about this, as mentioned earlier, I will link the Alpha Edge video, which I did below, which really goes into detail on the digital light synthesis process that they use to create these midsoles. But here they've just included step 1, data collection. Step 2 is creating stiffness targets. Step 3 is running optimization and simulation. Step 4 is lattice tuning. And last but not least, step 5 is printing. Now, from a sizing perspective, these were only available here in South Africa in full UK sizes. For those of you watching in the US or whoever uses US sizing, that is half US sizes only. Now, for me, who is a true UK 9, that might have been a really, really nice thing. However, when I did try the shoe on without the insole, they fitted absolutely perfect, but they were a little bit too narrow for me with the insole in itself. It's not something that I wouldn't be able to get away with wearing. It was just slightly more tight on my one foot than the other that I'm at my max sort of comfortable level with. That said, if you are watching this from overseas, they did release these in full sizes, so including half sizes as well. So I would recommend taking a half size up just to be safe on the width of the shoe. And just before I get in talking about insoles, you do have 2 standard aero green insoles here with Consortium handshake logos done on both heel sections of the shoes. These do come wrapped individually in the box with the shoes, hence they weren't actually in there right now. Now, from a pricing perspective, this is something there's been a lot of talk about with the 4D technology, as the retail prices are just really, really, really high, not really making them very accessible to a vast majority of people who want to get into the technology. The good news with this particular pair, it has come down in price if we do compare it with the V1 version over here. This particular pair retailed for 7,000 Rand here in South Africa, and this one came in at 5,000. So there's a fair amount of decrease in price there. In my opinion, you are getting a lot more on this particular pair than you are with the V1 version over there. So maybe that is a step in the right direction, but I think overall 5,000 Rand is still just too far out of reach for a majority of people to be able to get into this technology itself. That said, I'm super interested to know from you guys where you think 4D technology should be priced at. What would you be comfortable paying for a pair of these at retail? retail here in South Africa or in the US in dollars if that's where you're watching from. But once again, overall, very stoked to have this pair in the collection. As you guys can tell, I am a huge fan of 4D, and I'm very lucky to be able to get my hands on these shoes even at these crazy prices. For those of you who do want to get a pair of these but just can't shell out that kind of money for this particular pair right now, the good news is that they are starting to go under retail in places like StockX, etc. Obviously, if you are here in South Africa, it's going to still cost you more to import the pair. But that said, there are still some pairs available here locally, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do get marked down in the future. But that's all I've got to say for this particular pair. I hope you guys have enjoyed this review. If you do have any further questions, please drop them in the comments below. And don't forget, if you haven't already, to hit the subscribe button right here and give this video a thumbs up. But that's all from me for today. I'll catch you guys on the next one.